How come most startups fail, even when we have more tactics and strategies than ever before? Join the bedside chat of an entrepreneurial couple as they share what it takes to create a business with ease and in flow.
Welcome back to another episode of the Biz in Flow Bedside Chat. I'm Natasha Koo.
And I'm Jachym.
Welcome back.
Welcome back. I think she's just saying welcome back because she's trying to think of what to talk about. But I can start till you know what to talk about.
It's your podcast, Jachym. Go ahead.
It's our podcast.
Go ahead.
I was thinking today about the different kind of modes that are important when building a business. And one of them is the kind of strategic and planning side of the business, where you look at what you're creating, how you're going to create it. It's just more planning, more bird's eye view in a sense of what's going on in the business, and you see yourself outside of the business. And then there's the mode of execution, which is really important. And if you have a small scale business, or if you are a solopreneur or something like that, or a couple, then most likely you're going to do a lot of the executing. And without the execution, any kind of vision or imagination or strategy is not going to come to fruition. And so there are two important modes. But at the same time, if you're just doing execution and you forget about stepping back and looking what works or what doesn't work, and how you're doing yourself, then you can kind of get lost in a swamp as well of just doing things mindlessly at that point rather than with a purpose, because every action that you do in your business has a purpose to, grow the business in some way, shape or form. And if it doesn't work in that way after a certain time period, then it needs to be discarded.
From what I understand, or what I've heard in the past, people call this working on the business versus in the business. It's kind of the same thing as yesterday's podcast, where we talked about like the conflict we had. And a lot of the times we're inside of it and we have our heads down. We only see, I guess, a meter or a foot around us, and that's the only perspective we have. And sometimes, when it comes to the details, that's the level of distance that you need. Like, you need to be very, very close to it. But then again, that isn't the place that you should be all the time, because then you lose track of the grand scheme of things, and you lose track of the big strategy, the big direction, and all that kind of stuff. So working on your business in it versus on it.
And also the ability to think about your business, because an insight or a thought can change the direction of your business, and it can really influence it in a big way. And I think lots of people, once they get started, they lose sight of that, and they just hustling away instead of actually taking steps back in the day, or at least during the week or whatever. I think it's really important.
I think, yeah, exactly. It's important to find a balance between these two sort of, one is a relatively creative, almost intuitive outlet, while the other one is like a pure output. So you're cranking work out, you have your to-do list, it's focused, it's clear, and you're just kind of going through the motions, and you gotta get through your list, right? You gotta do what you have to do as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, and that's the second mode. There's someone who we quite like. His branding is outrageous, but in a way you can say that it's remarkable. So his name is Dan Locke. I enjoy his content quite a bit because he gets to the point and he's very, very honest in what he says. But I do believe in a lot of his tactics and what he shares. But one of the things that he does throughout the day, and it's hilarious, but he spends time just to dream, daydream, to think. So he has a chunk of his day where he literally just sits there and just doesn't even have to solve anything for the business, doesn't actively need to do anything for the business, but he gives himself space to just be.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's wonderful. And he says that, it's in this allotted time that a lot of insights come. He's not trying to solve anything yet. Answers might come, insights might just pop out, and he might get an intuitive idea to collaborate with someone, or to then shift a business, or get a completely new insight that makes everything different, and then he'll then have to execute on that. But I thought it's so valuable to do that. And then just another side fact about Dan Lok, which I think is so hilarious and I can really relate to, because Jachym and I have our moments too, is when he's kind of like had enough of computer time, or he needs a break, he'll just go into his theater room and sing karaoke, like a song. He'll scream out his karaoke song and then he'll go back to work, just like taking a little fun break. And I think that's necessary too. I think it makes it so much fun to work from home, because Jachym and I can just break into like pretty much musical theater or into a dance party for like 5 minutes and be like, all right, back to work.
Yeah, and I like that. It's just a lot lighter and less restricted, and life is kind of that way. It just flows, and when you're not kind of trying to grasp it and make it a certain way, then you can just ride the wave rather than trying to make the wave. And what did you learn or reflect on today?
Today was another big day for me, refining my story for the About Me page. It was a bit difficult because, I'm however old I am. But I have so many experiences, and it was very interesting to write my story for you guys. It just brought up moments when I was 5 years old and just figuring out who I am, like as a child. And then later on in high school and university, still trying to find my place in the world, still finding what it is that I should fit into in terms of a job. And just like, it felt like I was always on this search to find something that felt right for me. And it's interesting to look back upon it, because I have grown so much in the last few years, and especially since meeting Jachym. But when I look back on like decades ago, and who I used to be, and the questions that I used to ask myself, like, why am I here? Why am I who I am? And what is it that I should do here? How can I fit in? How can I find my place in the world? It was this theme that just pretty much didn't stop. It was there as long as I remember, and it was with me no matter where I went in the world, because I moved many continents. And it just was this thread that was in my story the whole time. And it's very interesting because within my past or in my story, a big role or a big factor that kind of shifted how I reacted each step of the way was what I thought was right. It's as if I wanted to do what was right. Like, I'm a good person, I like to do what's right. But ultimately, that influenced me to get the right job, to do the right thing, to be very agreeable, to suddenly have these expectations that I realized weren't actually mine in any way, but just what society expected me to be, what my peers, what people around me think I should be happy with. So yeah, it was really interesting to see how I didn't want to settle. That's the thing. I didn't want to settle, yet, in some situations I had a really good job, yet I still wasn't content. So it feels like, at least for me, I always longed for something more than just what people call success and what people call a good life. So that was what I learned about, I guess, my past and how it actually fits in with the work that we do today with, my previous business or the current business, Feminine Space. It makes sense now because I really needed to carve out my own way, and it was strange because I needed to actually do everything that everyone told me I should do just to realize that it doesn't work for me. So a lot of U-turns and a lot of roads that led to nowhere only to get to where I am now. It's kind of strange.
And I think when it comes to building businesses, people often try to look at what's profitable or what makes sense, like in the sense of in the market and all of that, and they sometimes forget to look at themselves and where they've come from and the journey they've taken and what knowledge they have already acquired, because it's very easy for you, for example, you studied something, to make a business out of that if you have the knowledge in that area already. And often we're kind of busy running away from where we don't want to be, that we forget to look actually at the gold and the gifts that we have gotten from that particular experience.
Yeah, I guess what you're saying here reminds me of how sometimes it can feel like when we make a decision, so this could be any sort of commitment, it could be commitment to someone, a partner, or it could be commitment to something you studied. For example, I studied environment and business, sustainability and business, and when I chose that, once I left, school, it was as if I had this glass case or glass box around me. Like I made that choice back in high school to study this. Now that I've graduated and kind of finished that, I better keep up with it. Like, it doesn't make sense if you get out of that glass box. Like, you chose it. Like, why should you ever leave that? People expect you to stay there. People, like, it's as if you make one decision, say it's a significant one where you spend time and money and you invest in it and all of that, but it's as if once you make one decision, you can't change your mind. And that's something that it just really shows itself for me, is that we can change our mind and we can always shift our path in a completely different direction. I remember when I first started Feminine Space, when I first started energy healing, people said, "What the heck are you doing?" And like how can you do this? Like, when you have no experience in it, right? And I didn't know how to answer it, because it's true. At the beginning, you don't have any experience in it. You have your identity, you have that foundation in the previous job or the previous position or previous work, right? In that glass box. But the moment you break free from it, it's as if you kind of start new again. You start from ground zero. And then it's really hard for people to grasp the idea that we can reinvent ourselves, we can change directions completely, we can do something we've never done before and make a business out of it, make a life out of it, like, let that be our purpose, something that we never ever thought of before. It's just so strange. I don't think that any decision we've made in our past should dictate how the rest of our life should go. Yet that's how a lot of people think. That's how people I guess judge one another too. And I had to go through that.
Yeah, I think it's pretty amazing on how creative we can be as human beings and how we can reinvent ourselves, and at the same time also just for your own sake, you can be mindful of what you have learned in the past. Not that you have to be stuck to that necessarily, but you can use those skills in whatever new venture you embark on as well. Like when I look at my life, the different stages, for example, martial arts, I'm not necessarily practicing martial arts right now, yet the focus, the persistence, the spirit of martial arts is in what I do, and it's definitely still very helpful. And I actually start thinking about picking up some of it up again after not having, engaged in it for years actually. So sometimes the things that you've put aside for a long time come up sometimes later as well that can be useful in some way. And yeah, you're absolutely right. You can completely reinvent yourself.
I would just say that for any of the listeners who think you can't start a business, you can't turn your hobby into your job or your work. It's just not true. It's such a made-up idea that anything we committed to in the past, like, and I'm not talking about like children here, or people who you are like responsible for and you're a caretaker for. Like, I'm not talking about that kind of thing. I'm talking about that glass box that we put ourselves in. If we're wishing and we're dreaming and we're thinking about something that's outside of this box, like day in, day out, why are you still in the box, right? That box is just an idea. It's an idea we had once upon a time, and it felt right then. And then we did something about it because it felt right. But then when it doesn't feel right anymore, get out of it.
Yeah.
And I don't think that many of us think of it in this, I guess, simple way, in a way we're actually guided to do. We're so caught up in thinking, oh, then what's the how, and then like what's the timeline, and what are the details, and how would it work, and suddenly we wrap ourselves up in this trap that we need to know every single thing on this path, right? Like, and know the answer to every single problem that could come up in order to even begin. And I don't think in life I was ever in the position to know 100% or be prepared 100%. I'm not psychic, so I can't help you there either. Yet we're able to navigate it.
I believe that human beings underestimate their creative power they have, and not just creative power in dreaming things up, but actually creative power in creating. You can create. I mean, just look around you. Wherever you are, you can look around you and you can see pretty much everything around you has been created or influenced in some way, shape, or form by human beings, especially if you are in a city or in a room. That's all. Someone dreamed it up and then took action to create it. And we underestimate that because you have that creative power yourself. It is in you to create whatever you want to create in life. Yes, it takes steps and iterations and all of that, but it is in there within you, and just realizing that you have that power and that you can step up and that you can create a life that is good for you and your family and for the people who get in touch with that business, for example. That you have this creative power, that is a game changer. It sets you up in a completely different way, because most people that think about starting a business and would like to start a business, they see the difficulty and the not being able to do it and the obstacles and all kinds of things that are in there. And sure, there are challenges that come your way, but your creative power is much bigger than anything that can come your way. There's always a solution.
I completely agree with you. It's so true that there's always a way. And I kind of want to wrap up this episode, not because I'm very sleepy right now.
I am.
Okay. But because I just want to say one more thing. There's always a solution, and I always believe that there's always an easier way too, like a simpler way to go about doing things. But if you are in this space where you are actually looking for excuses, you're actually not committed and you're not really wanting to do something, and you're actually trying to convince yourself, like you're believing your ego, you're believing your fears, you're believing your worries, so you're kind of like on the lookout for all these things, then I promise you too that you'll find an infinite amount of reasons and scenarios and situations and examples where you're gonna fail, and you're right. Because there's so many ways that you can fail, and like there are infinite ways and examples in which like life could go wrong, business could go wrong. But if that's what you're looking for, you're gonna find it, I'm really sure. And if you want to find problems, you could be doing this unconsciously or consciously, but if you're looking for problems, and the no's, you're gonna find it.
You're basically using your creative power in the opposite direction, where it's becoming more destructive and actually holding you back rather than bringing you forward.
Yeah, so it really depends on what it is that you want. And I'm really honest, and I think Jachym is too, in this aspect that those who want help will be helped, those who don't want to take action will not. And we can't push anyone forward who doesn't want to move forward. And those who actually really want this or are wishing and are ready to move forward, like, we can't even stop you guys. You guys are going to do it. So, but anyways, I wanted to point out this, though, because if you want a solution, you want an easier way, you want to build your business with more ease, that is absolutely possible. If you want to, stop yourself or to find out all the ways in which things could not work out, you can do that too. But it's completely up to you. But a solution is always there. No matter how many problems we make up in our minds, there's still going to be a solution. We're just making up problems, that's all.
Yeah, and I could just recommend to start taking full responsibility for your life, because that's another way of shifting out of the kind of more passive victim kind of mindset that we can fall into.
Yeah.
Start taking responsibility for where you're at, and start taking responsibility for that you can move out of where you're at.
Yeah, and I get sometimes it can be very emotional, and we can dip into these places even if we're a very committed business owner, or we're an aspiring entrepreneur. Maybe we are extremely committed and dedicated person, but sometimes we still believe our thoughts and we might dip into it, and that's not a problem. But I'm just kind of pointing out, like, the position you can take in this game. It's just literally a game, and you can take your position, and depending on what you take, it can look extremely different. But I just want to remind you that we're in the same game. It's the same world. And that's kind of how our mind works and the tricks that it can play. Yeah.
I'm gonna start going to bed. I am very tired.
So I hope that this episode really helped you. I know that there was a lot of truth thrown around, and I know that truth can sometimes just hit home, and it might not always feel really nice or cozy or comfortable, but sit with it and be honest with yourself. What did we share today that rings true for you? What did you take home today? We'd love to hear from you. Then head over to bizinflow.com and share with us, what have you learned, and what are you personally going through with yourself and your business? Because there's a whole community of you and of us out there, and we're really here to support one another. So if you have someone who's on the fence trying to decide what it is that they want to do next, start a business, or to keep going, or to give up, please share this episode wherever you're listening from, because I'm sure that it'll give a good dose of truth and clarity so that they can make the right decision for themselves and also take the right position. How do they want to play this game? And if they want to play this game. So thanks for joining us today.
Good night.
Good night. Jachym's ready for bed.